trust reigns supreme. All of our fears defeated, our benefits tremendous.
The compulsion is one of the ways deity influences and enriches the lives of the sons of Zacharias. When a man meets his Kaylee, he will feel compelled to place his soul securely within her keeping. She will feel her own compulsion to take his soul, to keep it safe, to be an active part of the critical exchange that is the foundation, the very bedrock principle of the Estolian faith. Dominic Zakarian, Essay, The Compulsion.
I don't know what to say, Dominic. You asked me what I think of you as a man.
She moved towards the study, pausing to look back at him. He watched as she walked away, but when she stopped, he approached her as she spoke, as if he was moving against his will.
When I first met you, before I got a good look at you, I thought you were 60, or even a little older. Once I really saw you, I realized you could not be that old. So then, I thought you were a young at heart 45. While age really should not matter, it did. You were too old for me, more than twice my age, or so I thought. But that did not make me stop thinking about you, about your wonderful nature. You pamper me and always treat me like a lady. You too have a wonderful mind that I find stimulating. Your turn of phrase is intriguing. When you speak, your accent is like molten gold pouring down my spine, arousing me. I feel a rush of heat when you talk with me. When I allow myself the luxury of thinking about you as a man, I consider you extremely attractive. I even wonder what you look like undressed. I imagine the feel of your skin under my fingertips.
She picked up one of his hands, turning it over, tracing the lines on his palm before her eyes met his.
From my first night here in your home, I've fallen asleep immersed in fantasies of your hands on my body. And when I wake, I am always frustrated by the way my dream has, yet again, been interrupted. Just as our lovemaking reaches that culminating moment, as you prepare to make me yours, I wake.
She moved closer to him, setting his hand on her ribs just below her breast.
I've never slept with a man, but I have been frustrated every single morning that just when you are ready to possess my body, I wake up, deprived of the feel of your body entering mine. It has been driving me crazy, because you warned me off in the beginning, and I believed there was no hope, no future, and that our ages were incompatible.
She slid her hands around his waist.
Do you think, Dominic, that only the man is given a compulsion? Perhaps your cousins are so successful because they aren't the only ones who have been compelled.
He kissed her, pressing his body against hers, the feel of his mouth over hers, though exactly like the dreams she constantly had since she arrived. She felt as if she was reliving a real event that had already taken place. He pulled back to look at her, his eyes half closed.
Jasmine, will you be my lady, my wife, my everything? Will you take my soul and keep it safe?
I will be what you want and need me to be,
she assured him. It was suddenly, gloriously okay. She needed Dominic in a way that was far beyond her understanding. He took her hand, and turned with her, leading her to his bedroom. He began unbuttoning his shirt, his eyes on her. As he finished, she tugged at the sleeves, dropping the shirt on a nearby chair. She lifted her hands to the warmth of his chest, stroking the sparse blonde wisps of hair, his firm masculine nipples. His pulse was frantically beating in his throat. She leaned forward to kiss him over the spot. The salty taste of his skin, combined with his subtle personal scent, were erotic enhancements to the sensual banquet before her. As she explored his chest, neck, and shoulders with her hands and mouth, he unzipped her dress, pushing it off her shoulders. The garment fell to the thick carpet. Her breasts were unconfined, and soon he was returning touch for touch. She ran her hands over his back before dropping them to the curve of his backside. His slacks restricted her freedom to touch him. She found the buckle of his belt, undoing both the belt and zipper easily. She slipped her hands into his pants to caress the skin of his buttocks. His muscles clenched at the brush of her skin on his. In response to her touch, his mouth swooped down, his tongue dueling with hers. She pushed at his trousers until they fell to the carpet. She allowed her hands to roam over his body with the confidence of having done it in her dreams a dozen times before. Her tactile explorations brought her to the heated skin of his erection. He slid his hands under her briefs to cup the globes of her bottom before pulling her up against his body. The only cloth between them were her flimsy undergarments. When he stepped back, she protested before realizing that he was holding out a hand to her.
Jasmine?
He whispered. She put her hand in his without hesitation, and he led her to the large bed. His hands were shaking slightly as he pushed her undergarments down her hips to the floor. They climbed into the bed, focused only on one another. She lay next to him. He looked at her and then caressed her breasts before taking one upright nipple into his mouth. His tongue tantalized the peak while one hand duplicated his ministrations on her other breast. While his mouth and hands were raising her pulse, she explored his body, thrilling to the rippling of his skin in response to her touch. He cupped her intimately with his hand as he pulled back from her breast and looked into her eyes. He pressed against the central bundle of nerves. Her legs jerked at the exquisite buildup of sensation. While he touched her with his hands, he lavished attention on her breasts with his mouth, first one breast, then the other before he kissed her body in a trail of nibbling kisses across her stomach, until he was between her thighs, pulling her open so that he could taste her readiness. Her entire body thrummed to his touch, and she cried out at the intimate stimulation of her nerve endings. She was quivering and wanting by the time he began to move back up her body.
Dominic,
She said. This was much further than her fantasies took her every morning. She needed to know what it was like to possess and be possessed. Her eyes never left his as she ran one of her legs up the outer edge of his, caressing him with her thigh, her knee, her calf, before repeating the same motion with her other leg. He moved and she felt his desire prodding against her. With a warmth in his eyes, he surged past her barrier, watching the knowledge in her eyes as she understood fully the possession of her soulmate. The sting of his intrusion was nothing compared to the deep soul-satisfying sensation of completion. Her soul itself felt as if it was filled to overflowing. Their bodies surged and moved in a dance enhanced by how perfectly matched they were, how elementally compatible. Her whole being gloried at the sensation of fulfillment. They felt the pinnacle of pleasure together, crying out, their voices like their bodies, blending into one perfect whole.
The pathway of tradition in the Estolian tree. Zacharias connection.